There have been significant changes in Colombian foreign policy under the administration of President Juan Manuel Santos. Some of those were alluded to in the opening remarks. Within days of taking office, President Santos reestablished diplomatic relations with Venezuela. He worked assiduously to restore the relationship with Ecuador. The relationship with the United States has become more nuanced and less singular. Trade, investment, and security cooperation with Brazil has reached unprecedented levels. Cuba, of course, is the site of the peace talks between the government and the FARC. Commercial relations with China, with Singapore, South Korea, Japan are expanding and solidified by a host of free trade agreements that have either been concluded or negotiated with those in other Asian countries. Colombia has taken steps to unify its stock exchange with Chile and Peru, and the countries of the Pacific Alliance, as was discussed a moment ago, including Mexico, will soon meet in Cartagena, where just last year President Santos hosted the Summit of the Americas and took a leading role in calling for a rethinking of the war on drugs. That process is underway. It will have a major milestone in Antigua, Guatemala, when there is a presentation by the Organization of American States of a report that came out of the summit. So to reflect on these trends and explain their meaning, we have three distinguished panelists, beginning with Patti Londoño. And I have a brief bio that I'd like to share because she is truly an impressive person and Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs. She has a PhD in political science and international affairs. She is a researcher in the School of Finance, Government, and International Relations of the Universidad External de Colombia. She's written books on the United Nations, on the non-aligned movement, and has conducted undergraduate studies in Switzerland, Sweden, and Spain. And her doctoral dissertation was on the construction of the final document of the 2005 United Nations Summit. I don't have as much extensive information about our other panelists. Kevin Whitaker, who is Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, a long-standing expert on the Andean region, on Colombia, on Venezuela, and an extremely qualified diplomat and someone who has really served the United States in this city and abroad with distinction. And finally, Eric Farnsworth, Vice President of Council of the Americas. Eric has long experience as an analyst of Latin American affairs, as a leader in the U.S. Private sector, in the Latin American private sector, and worked for the White House for Mac McLarty, the special envoy of President Bill Clinton. So again, with many years of experience in and outside government. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Patti. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I would like to thank all the organizers for hosting us and allowing us to share with you some of the features of the new Colombia. I would like, first of all, to express our solidarity for the victims of the attacks in Boston. Colombia, as you know, has also suffered from terrorism, and so we know the fear and the pain that these acts produce and cause in society and to the families and the victims. So really all our hearts is with the American people and the people of Boston. I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to feature only sort of the most important characteristics of the last few years in our foreign policy. And maybe during the conversation and the debate, we can explore some other issues. So if I don't mention something that you are particularly interested, please say you can ask the questions later. Colombia, as you know, it's President Santos is leading us towards a more just Colombia, a more modern Colombia, and a more secure Colombia. And we, from the foreign policy perspective, we try also to enhance all these and to implement them around the world. In the region, the best news happening is the Pacific Alliance. And this is something that we started building couple of years ago, and this derives from Arco del Pacífico. I don't know if you have ever heard about this organization, and this very important one actually, because it has tried to put all the Pacific countries in Latin America in line with some policies. So what we did is to have a more like a faster integration, and that's what the four of us, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, started negotiating a more profound integration. So now, the 23rd of May, we're having the summit in Colombia, in Cali, and this has been, and plus we have also a business forum, and the Pacific Alliance has created a great, immense interest from everywhere and everybody. Everywhere we go in the world, we talk about the Pacific Alliance, and we've been not only asking, received a lot of questions and interest, but also the new partners in the world are also very much interested. So what we want, and together the Pacific Alliance countries, we are the 9th economy in the world, the highest population in Latin America, $2.1 trillion dollars in GDP, and in average more than 10,000 GDP per capita, and all countries open to world economy. And of course, some of these countries are more integrated to Asia than Colombia is. So for us, the Pacific Alliance is very important for our purpose of integrating more with Asia, which is one of the key priorities of the foreign policy. We have had a lot of interest from many countries, and now we have a lot of observers, and from countries that maybe in the past we never thought could be interested, not only in Colombia, but also in the region. So Australia, New Zealand, we've recently received the visit of the Prime Minister of New Zealand to Colombia. This is completely new for us. And you have to understand Colombia in a way that we have, over the last 10 years, we have overcome so many obstacles and problems, and especially perceptions, and maybe you are very much aware of these perceptions, and reality in Colombia has changed faster than perceptions, and this is something that we're trying to convey to the whole world. So we come from a moment in the past that it was very difficult. Narcotics Colombia has suffered from narcotics like no other country in the world. So terrorism as well. So you have to think that Colombia is not like, I don't know, this disappeared. Colombia is a country that is coming from a difficult moment. So now when we have all this interest from partners around the world, this is new for us, and that means also that we have done something right over the last 10, 12 years. And this was also our responsibility to do things right. And we are on the path to do it right. So when we get the interest from many countries in the world, so we really value that, and we really appreciate that interest. With the traditional, so in the region, and I suppose later we can talk about Latin America is a very dynamic region, it's a very complex region at the same time, and Colombia is one of the key actors, especially the closer strategic partner to the US. With the traditional partners, what we have done differently from before is changing the issues of the agenda. Like before with the United States, our main trade partner as well, mostly the issues were concerned about security, and we believe the success of Colombia in terms of security are also success of the United States, and we really value and treasure this cooperation we have with the United States. But now what we try to do in our main goal has been to diversify the issues. We're very rich in energy, mining. We need a lot of support and cooperation in innovation, science and technology. Colombia, probably you know, is the most biodiverse country in the world by a square kilometer, and the second one after Brazil. So that means that we have a lot of potential for biotechnology and other natural sciences, especially that is going to be a main resource in the future. So this has been our key, most important objective, both with the United States, Canada, the European Union, Japan, and other very highly developed countries. The FTAs have been already mentioned, so I'm not going to mention this. The only thing that I want to put in your minds is the OECD. President Santos has been leading a process for accession to the OECD, and we're very grateful with the United States and the support of the United States in this. So we hope that we were going to have a kind of clearance in May in the meeting of the OECD. And Colombia has made a big effort. Why do we want to be members of the OECD? To increase our standards, to be better partners, and to increase our governance. So this for us is indeed very important. Asia Pacific and Central Asia are also very important for us, and we have done over the past 2 years a big effort to get closer to these regions. And we have had a lot of results very quickly. For example, and we go very focused to each of the countries that we visit, we go very focused. And so Australia and New Zealand are, of course, very important. And as I mentioned, the Prime Minister of New Zealand was there. The dairy industry in Colombia can really benefit from the New Zealand experience, and we have already have some experiences for joint business and joint operations. So this is in case to improve our productivity. Australia as well, and you know, Colombia is a mining country, so Colombia is we're an oil as well, nearly 1 million barrels a day, and a lot of potential for mining. So good mining, sustainable mining from Australia is very important to us. And I don't know if you have heard about the civets. Have you heard about the civets? Are you familiar with civets? Colombia is a civets, and so it means Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa. And we developed something that we call the Civets Plus. So Civets is not working like the BRICS, for example, but Civets, we wanted to have this excuse. And when I mentioned where Colombia came from, and so when we were in a very high objective data and objective criteria and objective analysis saying that Colombia was a promising country, and that got the interest of many partners around the world and investors. So that was a good moment for us. Maybe other countries would say, Civets, I'm not so interested, but for us it was a good momentum. And it was also an excuse to find partners all over the world. So we developed what we call the Civets Plus, and the Plus is Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. And we do South-South cooperation, and we started with the South-South cooperation dialogue. We have had meetings in Cartagena, Colombia, and we also do a lot of video conferencing. And we are working jointly in an e-government project. And so this is completely new, because in the past we didn't have so much relationship with any of these countries. So the CIVET has allowed us to find an excuse and a good momentum to work together. And why are we interested in the Asia Pacific and Central Asia, and especially Asia Pacific? Because of the TPP, because of APEC, and with Pacific Alliance to get closer to ASEAN. So whenever we visit all these countries, we talk about these issues, and we know that many things we do now are going to have the most wider results, like in 5-6 years. So that's what we're building. We're building also with a long-term strategy. And when you see the trends of growth in the world for the next 20 years, everybody points to South America, to Central Asia, and to Asia Pacific. So that's where we are also building the bonds that will create a lot of opportunities to us. With Africa, what we have done is cooperation in security. As you know, with the United States, we have also built a lot of capacities in security. So with Africa, we are developing seminars, especially for the narcotics. And as you know, the narcotics is a world drug issue, and terrorism as well. So with Africa, we have been engaging in that, and also we have been hosting a lot of African countries in Colombia. That is also completely new to us. That wasn't happening in the past. And we are together with the US in a GCTF. I don't know if you know about the GCTF, the Global Counterterrorism Forum. It's a very good forum. It shares best practices. We are the only country in Latin America participating in the GCTF, and now in April we're going to host a workshop on anti-kidnapping in Colombia for the GCTF members, and we're very much looking forward to the participation of all the partners of GCTF. And all our policies are based in diversifying and having the peoples at the center of it. And we have developed, and this is something that I want to finish with, the SDGs. I don't know if you have heard about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals were presented at the Rio conference, and Colombia actually developed this a couple of years ago, and we started working with all partners around the world to point out the importance of having a post-2015 agenda which is different and which is more encompassing and comprehensive, not only the MDGs, but how to transform the MDGs in the post-2015 agenda. Minister Holguín is member of the Secretary General's panel. The panel is going to present the report in May. And this is very important, and especially this is important for young people. What we want to do with the SDGs is, you all agree that issues like energy are important, water, oceans, food security, sustainable cities, infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, patterns of consumption and production. These are things that you are probably studying and hearing all the time. So what we want is to invite the international community to be very ambitious and to be very smart and very wise. And what is it that we're going to do jointly together for the post-2015? So that's what we have proposed, the SDGs. At the beginning, nobody wanted to hear about the SDGs, and believe me, it was very difficult to promote this idea. President Santos, when we from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we told him we have this idea for the post-2015. He immediately supported us, and he started working with us. He went to Rio, Minister Holguín as well. So we did a very good job in promoting, and now when we go to different seminars, we are being invited to so many workshops for the post-2015, and everybody is talking about the SDGs, and not only the government, but also the civil society and international organizations. So I think we're building something, and why I think it's important for young people to really get involved in this process. Not only we want the new agenda, the new global agenda, to be universal, non-reversible, so whatever we gain with the new agenda, it shouldn't be reversible. We also want to press on sustainability, and especially on equity. Equity inside the nations, equity between nations, and equity between generations. And here is where I believe that we have a big chance and a big opportunity to create something with a long-term perspective. And that's why the youth organizations and the young students and young people have something to say. Whatever we do and how ambitious we are right now to make a global agenda more encompassing, comprehensive, and really dealing with the world issues that will make a better world for the future generations. So this is an invitation that we work together in building this global agenda. Colombia is going to be to continue to be committed to the creation of this global agenda, very active. And despite of the enormous difficulties that we still face, we have decided to be proud again of our past, our present, our future, and our history, and then to involve more with the world, and to share the experiences we have, to share the challenges we have, and to be a good member of the international community. Thank you.
Good morning, buenos días, bienvenidos a todos. Thank you, Dr. Langer, for the opportunity to present here today, and thank you to Ambassador Urrutia and the others, distinguished folks here for your participation. I think just to start off with, I agree with everything that everybody said beforehand. Actually, the discussion that's taken place so far is actually very rich in capturing how far Colombia has come. And I think that what you've heard so far is a really good encapsulation of why we're so optimistic about Colombia and its future and our being able to work together. Let me make a couple of very introductory remarks, and then I'll get into several matters that I'd like folks to consider in particular with respect to the topic. First off, I would be remiss in not acknowledging the Vice Minister's kind reference to the events in Boston. Obviously, it's a very tragic event, and our country is going to do everything that we can to investigate this, and as the President said, make sure that there's accountability. One of the things we learned after 9/11 is that the work of confronting terrorism, if this in fact was a terrorist act, is a work for all nations. And we've had for many years a good partner in Colombia. And so it's very appropriate to discuss that here today. Because I'm not otherwise going to cover it in great detail in my remarks, I would also like to pay tribute to what the Vice Minister said about the environment. Actually, I learned a lot from what she said. Very interesting approach on the part of Colombia. And part of the reason that it's so interesting is Secretary Kerry has made clear to us that one of his principal goals in his time as Secretary is going to be an environmental agenda. He's particularly interested in oceans, but he's interested in the broad range of seeing how governments and civil society can collaborate to ensure that our environment is protected and sustained. So that's very well received. Let me give you three things to think about that I think are important from our perspective in terms of Colombia's changed position and attitude in the world as it has moved forward into the 21st century. I'm going to start with security cooperation, and it's a little bit of a trap because actually the relationship between Colombia and the United States has moved far beyond security. And in fact, even when the central focus was security, it wasn't solely about security. So I don't want to leave the impression that I'm starting with security because it's most important. I'm starting with security to make another point. Now, the point is that Colombia has gone from a country which received a lot of assistance from the United States. But let me just put that into context. And I do this in every one of these talks that I do is Plan Colombia was a considerable amount of money, has been a considerable amount of money, about $8 billion, which probably represents about 6% of the total contribution to the effort, the total financial contribution to the effort. So it's important to note that the vast majority of the financial contribution to Plan Colombia came from Colombians. And I think that's important for all of us to note. So we could talk about what we've done and what we've provided, but rather it's important for me to share with you where Colombia has gone with that. And what Colombia has done with that, I would note two things in particular. One is it's served as a willing and capable partner with other nations in the hemisphere and is interested in doing so more broadly in the world. That's very important. They're doing this, I believe Colombia is doing this, because they see it as consistent with their interests and because they feel they have useful lessons to share with their neighbors in the hemisphere and more broadly. That certainly consists of things like tactics and intelligence-driven operations and things that we could talk about, and people in uniform could talk about better than me even. But it also includes matters like proper respect for human rights and the arc of progress that Colombia has gone through in its efforts to address these issues. It is in fact a process, and the elements that Colombia has brought to bear over time, institutionalizing a reference to international humanitarian law, making sure that message is pushed down through the ranks, ensuring leadership, which is a critical element, ensuring accountability. All of these elements are critical and are being shared as Colombia moves forward with these activities in the region. I note in particular there was an article in the Post today that the Inter-American Human Rights Commission has taken Colombia off its list of most grave concerns for human rights matters in the hemisphere. That's incredibly important. That's a very important, significant fact. There's another aspect to security cooperation that I'd like to highlight as well, and that is Colombia is a model for international engagement. Now, all comparisons are odious. Whenever you compare one thing or another, there's a cost that's paid. But what I think that the United States and Colombia have shown is that when there's a willing partner on both sides, and when there's real interchange on both sides, and when there's a willingness to work together on both sides, enormous things can be accomplished. If you talk to folks on the U.S. side, who've worked for years and years on Colombia, and there are folks who've been there for kind of the duration, 6-8 years, what they tell you is the most significant contribution, the most significant element of Plan Colombia it wasn't the helicopters and it wasn't the intelligence support. What it was the working together of Americans and Colombians towards a common goal. It was that sharing of experiences, which occurred in both directions. And to the extent that we could replicate that experience with respect to other nations in the world, or Colombia could do so with respect to other nations on its own steam, I think that would be a very important lesson, something that would be very helpful to international security. Second item, open markets and democracy. Colombia is an open market country. It has shown its commitment to open markets, to a rigorous free trade agenda. It has, we've heard some already of the many nations that Colombia signed free trade agreements with. It has shown its commitment to a high standards free trade agenda through the Alliance of the Pacific. It has shown its commitment to seek to join OECD and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And these are really important matters, and it shows Colombia's embrace of this open market system, which we believe as a matter of policy is the path that leads to the greatest prosperity for the greatest number of people. To have Colombia as an example with all of the problems that it brought to the table 10 years ago or 15 years ago and achieve what it has done, what you saw it has done, is really a remarkable example for the region and for the world. It's also an authentic and fully functioning representative democracy. I'll make a parenthetical reference here to events in Venezuela. And I think all of us are concerned about what's going on in Venezuela and the talk of violence, et cetera. This is a society which is clearly demonstrated to be divided more or less in half. And the discussion between those two halves appears to have broken down. At its worst, Colombia had grave problems, but it wasn't those sorts of problems. The representative democracy system continued to function. In fact, is more vigorous now than ever. And so that, too, becomes an example for other nations in the hemisphere and more broadly, particularly, as I say, that it occurred in the circumstances which I noted of an insurgency. Let me make a final point about multipolarity. You will hear if you pay attention to declarations out of other capitals in South America, shall we say, that the United States is bitterly opposed to a multipolar world and is insistent upon domination of the hemisphere and domination of the world. That, in fact, is false, but that's okay. They can say what they like. In fact, what we seek in the hemisphere are capable, empowered partners who are interested in working with us on either a broad or narrow set of issues. And it is a good thing. It is an enriching thing. It is a powerful thing to have a diverse set of countries in the region, especially those who share our values, open markets and democracy and respect for human rights, who have their own views on matters, who stand up and take positions, who come up with innovative ideas, like you heard the Vice Minister express. These are good things and positive things and empowering things, and we embrace them and think that they're very important. And you're seeing these developments of smart, capable, forward-looking, imaginative partners, not just in Colombia, although we're talking about Colombia here, but in Peru, where the social inclusion agenda of President Humala is something that's really remarkable, in Chile, and I could go on, in Brazil, of course. So rather than be threatened by the notion of multipolarity, we actually embrace the notion of empowered partners who are interested in working together with us on a broader, narrow set of issues. And whether we embrace it or not, it is the reality of the world that we live in today. Now, part of that reality is going to mean that we won't always agree about things. And that's okay. That's fine. I'm not here to tell you that we're delighted when Colombia takes a position that is contrary to ours on whatever matter, and I could probably cite a few, but I won't, because I'm a diplomat. But we deal with that level of complexity because we know that what lies underneath that is an enduring friendship that's built on nearly 2 decades of working together in some of the most intimate way that two countries have ever done. And so we deal with that complexity, we deal with that diversity, and we actually embrace it. Right. Many thanks for your attention. I will turn this over to Dr. Farnsworth. Thank you.
You know, there's an old saying in politics that says everything that can be said has been said, but not everybody has said it. So let me try to say some of the things that you've already heard, thank you, from two very distinguished colleagues and friends, and folks that I think you're going to hear some certain similarities with my own very brief comments before we go to interaction with all of you. But before we do that, let me thank Georgetown again. Let me thank Eric Tocayo with a wonderful seminar. Excellent day so far. Cindy, thank you for presiding and for your generous introduction. I also want to thank the people of Colombia, particularly, for sending to the United States, to Washington, two of their very best as ambassadors. And you heard from both of them this morning, the ambassador to the United States and the ambassador to the OAS, who have done just a marvelous job in their time here. Now, every time I come to a college campus to talk or to a local community outside Washington, I like to read the newspaper of the day, see what makes the front page, see what's on the minds of people. And oftentimes you learn a lot about a college community or the people in the community that you're trying to talk to. And so on the way over here this morning, I picked up the Hoya newspaper. And I was flipping through it on the front page, and I wanted to see what is occupying the minds of Georgetown students today. Front page, I look down, and it says, GUSA challenges keg rules. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is something that I'm glad to see is occupying the minds of college students, just the way, I must say, it did when probably all of us were in college back in the day. Some things change, like Columbia, and some things don't. But it's really good to be here with all of you. I just have, as I say, a couple comments about Columbia's emerging role. You've already heard the two primary thrusts emerge in terms of what I wanted to cover, and those are trade and economic affairs, and the number two, the export of security services, if you want to put it in those terms. And I think, speaking from the private sector, speaking as somebody who has followed Columbia for some time, Columbia really has taken a leadership role globally on international trade and investment matters. In the Western Hemisphere, increasingly in the Asia-Pacific, and more broadly as well. And I think that's very much to Columbia's benefit. We've already heard about the broad trade negotiation agenda. But you know, in terms of the exercise of leadership in any institution, any body, there really have to be at least two things present. One is ambition. You have to want to do it. And the second is capability. You have to be able to do it. And these two issues haven't always been in place in Columbia's past, but they are increasingly coming into place now. And the reason why is because domestically, and we've already heard this from all three presentations already, Colombia is a changed country. Colombia is different today than it was even just a few short years ago. And so you have a country that is increasingly peaceful, that is increasingly prosperous, that increasingly is focused on things that the rest of us might take for granted, for example, environmental protection and other things such as this. So you have increasingly a capability to be able to take a broader leadership role on some of these issues. But at the same time, if you're focused completely domestically, perhaps you have no ambition to take a leadership role. And what we've seen under President Santos is a broader ambition for Colombia, a bigger vision for Colombia. Yes, his first priority is continual to be, and it will be, and appropriately is, the reform of Colombia's economy, the building of peace in Colombia. We understand that, but also a bigger vision for Colombia's place in the world. And in that context, we see things like an interest in the OECD, which Colombia should have membership into. Certainly a leading role in Asia-Pacific trade with the Alliance for the Pacific, with Colombia as a founding member, and an interest in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization, APEC, which we haven't heard about today. And in my view, Colombia should have been part of APEC for a long time, which would then bring the possibility of access into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, I know some of this is somewhat technical, but in the interests of global activity, these are very, very important issues, because these are the institutions that are being created around which the Asia-Pacific environment will be formed. And if you talk to any global economist anywhere, they'll say that Asia really is the world's most dynamic economy, at least at this part in history. Parts of South America are right up there as well. But South America is increasingly wanting to be linked to Asia. The question is, will Colombia be part of that? And through no fault of its own, in my view, Colombia so far has not been allowed into APEC and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. At the same time, Colombia is doing some very interesting things bilaterally with some of the countries in the Asian region to try to build those relations even outside of formal trade negotiations. So again, an agenda there that is positive, that is being pursued. And the second thing that I want to mention, and Kevin raised it toward the end of his conversation, and I want to dig a little bit more deeply into that, because he talked about partnership, he talked about the United States and Colombia working together, which I think is precisely on point, very, very important point. But through those activities, Colombia, the United States, yes, but Colombia too has developed real expertise, real experience, real capability in terms of peace processes, in terms of security, in terms of counter-narcotics operations. And when you talk about partnership, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. I used to work in the State Department, I used to work in the White House. You can talk about partnership, but until you have partners actually working together toward a common goal, it really doesn't mean a whole lot. And in this context, Colombia and the United States have proven to be, and are proving to be, true partners. And you've seen Colombia take a position on the security side in Haiti, in Afghanistan, working together in Central America. We see a retired leader of the Colombian police forces, now a very close advisor on security to the President of Mexico. This is a role that Colombia can meaningfully and is meaningfully playing. And it's the export of real expertise, not just in Latin America, but globally, that really is building a profile for the country much beyond the old stereotypes of the past. And now, Colombia's been able to take that and turn it on its head so that the security challenges of the past have turned into advantages globally that they are able to promote these types of activities. So I think that's a very important point. I simply wanted to emphasize it a little bit more and to suggest that this is a real area that other countries are learning from as well. And then let me very briefly mention two other quick points. The first is the power of example. Now, you don't have to necessarily seek a formal leadership role in terms of the global economy to nonetheless play a leadership position, and let me explain what I mean. There are all kinds of models in the world in terms of investment climate, in terms of business, in terms of commercial affairs, and we see several of them in our own hemisphere, in Latin America and the Caribbean, certainly in North America as well. There are different models. Some work better than others. Colombia has pursued a path that seems to be working. And the economy is open. We've heard about that already. The investment climate is very, very attractive. And if you talk to business people in the United States, and certainly more broadly as well, you hear all the time when you ask what's the country or countries that you really think are doing some interesting things in the Western Hemisphere economically, Colombia is always on the list. Chile is always on the list. Mexico is increasingly on the list. And these are countries that, as a direct result of that, are attracting the type of direct foreign investment as well as domestic investment, keeping their own investment at home, to be able to develop the economy. And why is this important? It's very important because, as all of you know, if you've studied economics, you know that investment is a critical driver of national wealth, right? Remember those formulas that we all learned. So that's point number one. But point number two, if you're a country that is striving to develop, for example, your energy sector, which is highly capital intensive, you need money from abroad to be able to do that. And so what do you do to attract those finances? Well, you can't say we have all this oil in the ground because it hasn't been discovered. So you have to be able to attract investment, and you do so by creating an investment climate that's very attractive so that people will say, we need to take a look at Colombia. And that's precisely what's happening. It's precisely what's happening. Kevin mentioned Venezuela. If you compare what's happening on, just forget the politics, on the economic side between Colombia and Venezuela, it's like two totally different solar systems. It's not even two neighboring countries. It's totally different solar systems. And Colombia, frankly, has been the beneficiary in large measure of the collapsing Venezuelan energy sector in several ways. Now, in other ways, it's been a victim because Colombia's trade with Venezuela has very much been hampered, and that's bad for both countries because if you have one country in economic trouble, the trade flows are just going to decrease. So that's a bad aspect for, that Colombia has nothing to do with. But these are issues that directly impact people's lives and that we're seeing at a very important level. And the fact of the matter is the power of example then is something that is not just showing a path for other Latin American countries, but is also accruing to Colombia's benefit, because the business is increasing, the trade is increasing, the investment is increasing. That's good for the Colombian people. And that's clearly their first priority. And then the final thing I would mention is Colombia's very, as Cindy mentioned it, others have mentioned it, very direct effort to play a larger role, a constructive role in hemispheric affairs. We all know that just a year ago, Colombia and Cartagena hosted the Summit of the Americas, which was an important meeting. I was privileged actually to be at the first Summit of the Americas in Miami in 1994. I was at the second summit in Santiago in 1998. I followed the process very closely, and it ebbs and flows. But the bottom line is that President Santos was able, through this meeting, with the eyes of the hemisphere and indeed the world on Colombia, to present a Colombia that was totally changed from the Colombia that many people have known in the past. Is everything perfect in the country? Of course not. Of course not. Is everything perfect in every country? No. Is there a long ways to go? Yes. Is peace guaranteed in the country? No. Is the economy going to slow this year compared to last year? Probably. Will investment continue to be guaranteed in the energy sector if no significant finds are made in the short to medium term? Who knows? But without a crystal ball, we can't know the future. All we can do is position ourselves to be able to take best advantage of those circumstances to the best that they arise. And in my view, Colombia is doing precisely that.